So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've got over 24 clips for you on several different topics for what I think should be an interesting show tonight. As always, this is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with my commentary between the clips. This week, in addition to the Sunday morning news shows from the regular Big Five outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, I'll also use some quasi-news clips from last night's Saturday Night Live on NBC. The most clips will be on the big NSA spying news from the last week, but I'll also be talking a little bit more about last week's budget deal and a few other miscellaneous topics, but first, I'll start with the topic I never thought I'd be talking about, the controversy surrounding a reality show about a Louisiana family that makes duck calls because of anti-gay comments from the patriarch of the family, which became a partisan political issue last week, as Seth Meyers pointed out on last night's Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live, over in this clip.
A large number of conservatives on Thursday criticized A&E for suspending Duck Dynasty's Phil Robertson for his anti-gay comments, including Senator Ted Cruz, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, and Governor Bobby Jindal, or as they're collectively known, Dork Dynasty.
So, I guess the Dork Dynasty thing is kind of funny, but Saturday Night Live left out some of the members, including, well, I'll show Sarah Palin in a minute, but also former and possible future Republican presidential candidate Mike Huckabee, who's a Fox News host, and he also appeared on Fox News Sunday this morning, and he was trying to say that the comments from Phil on Duck Dynasty were no different from what President Barack Obama believed during his 2008 campaign, and you can see even Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday didn't buy that over in this clip.
What we've seen is that there's a new level of bullying on the part of these militant activist groups who, if anyone says something that holds to the same position that Barack Obama held in 2008 when he, at the Saddleback Church with John McCain, made it very clear that he opposed same-sex marriage, and he said he did so because he was a Christian and because of his biblical views. Well, if that position was okay in 2008, how come it isn't okay in 2013 or Governor, 2014?
But I think the counter-argument would be it isn't just the fact that Phil Robertson said that he disagreed with it or felt it was a sin. It's how he said it. And let's put some of that up on the screen. Robertson, in this article in Esquire magazine, called homosexuality a sin, but then went on to say, start with homosexual behavior and just morph out from there. Bestiality, sleeping around with this woman and that woman and that woman and those men. And then paraphrasing Corinthians from the Bible, he said, they won't inherit the kingdom of God. And when asked about blacks in Louisiana before the civil rights movement, he said, pre-entitlement, pre-welfare, you say, were they happy? They were godly. They were happy. No one was singing the blues. Are you not offended by any of that? Not the substance, but the way he expressed it and how he said it?
Well, he said it in a way that would be a little more probably appropriate for the Duckwoods than it would be for the pages of a major news magazine. By the way, I will say that I think I saw the world of the South a little differently than maybe he did growing up in South Arkansas. But that being said, this issue was never about those comments. This issue was specifically about GLAAD and the Human Rights Campaign protesting to A&E over his comments regarding same-sex relationships. Now, let's keep in mind that for a Christian to talk about sin, homosexuality is no more sinful to a Christian than is pride, than is lust. So if a person who is totally heterosexual lusts in his heart after a woman, that's as much sin as any other sin. There's no division about which sin is the most important. They're all out of the glory, out of the perfect will and mind of a holy God.
Now, I think that those comments there from Fox News' Mike Huckabee really minimized how nasty the comments were from the Duck Dynasty guy, and you can see another Fox News host, Greta Van Susteren, over on ABC's This Week, trying to distract from the comments by attacking the A&E network instead. And that comes after, I think there's an intro from George Stephanopoulos and then comments from Democratic strategist Donna Brazille over in this clip.
Turns out this was nothing new. He said gays are full of, quote, evil and murder in this 2010 sermon.
Women with women, men with men. They committed indecent acts with one another, and they received in themselves the due penalty for their perversions.
But after the suspension from A&E, owned in part by ABC, Commander Phil's supporters struck back.
A&E, they were absolute quacks on this one.
What happened to freedom of religion, freedom of speech?
Is this who we are? We're just gonna be quiet? Because he has an opinion about the scriptures?
Welcome back to the Culture Wars. Welcome back to the round table. Donna, they're from Louisiana, the Duck Dynasty, your state. Yeah. And they have really become an empire, which is why A&E, even though they suspended him, are also going to keep Commander Phil in the shows that are coming out in January.
Well, there's still about 9 or 10 episodes, and yeah, I've watched it for the recipes, of course. As a Louisianian, I know people who will say things aloud that more sophisticated people will keep to themselves. He was wrong. What he said was insensitive. He's apologized. I don't know if anybody will accept his apology. He has a right to free speech. Sarah Palin has a right to defend him. Glad has a right to attack him, and the rest of us have the right to turn on other channels.
But is the right to free speech the right to have his reality show?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, A&E can do what it wants, but A&E has got to be the quintessential hypocrite of the year, because while they suspend him, they have 5 hours the other night. They have a marathon today. They're going to air it in January. But so, I mean, I'm a little bit surprised at A&E because they act like, oh no, this is so horrible. They knew about this long before they even hired the guy.
Yeah, should we?
So yeah, there's Greta Van Susteren attacking A&E, and at least none of them were claiming it's like a First Amendment issue, because, you know, the deal between a private network and someone they pay to speak, they get to decide. It's actually, in some ways, it's A&E's free speech right to decide what they want to have on their network. And of course, Greta Van Susteren, you know, being shocked that A&E would try to profit by something that they now say that, you know, that they are find offensive. Well, I mean, doesn't Fox News show all sorts of stuff that they say is offensive, and then but by showing it, they like profit from that as well? So I don't know. The whole Duck Dynasty thing, I guess it shows that there's still a big backlash. You know, sometimes it seems like same-sex marriage rights and the rights of people based on sexual orientation are inevitable, but I guess this reminds us that there are people out there there are a lot of people out there who have the views of this Duck Dynasty guy and are at least willing to express them in some pretty nasty ways. And speaking of homophobia, there was this other news this week. President Obama, one of the American representatives to the U.S. Olympics, not to the Russian Olympics in Sochi, the Winter Olympics in Sochi, one of the American representatives is going to be former tennis star Billie Jean King, who's a gay rights activist. And they kind of parodied what that, since, you know, Russia has all these anti-gay laws, and that's a big controversy about the Sochi Olympics. Kate McKinnon from the Saturday Night Live cast parodied or played Billie Jean King, and I'll show you a short clip about what this meant that President Obama appointed her over in this clip.
Yeah, I couldn't be more excited, Seth. I'm President Obama's big gay middle finger, and this bird's about to get flipped.
That's quite a big thing.
So yeah, I was glad to see that there was at least that small victory for gay rights this week with the appointment of Billie Jean King. So anyway, I'm almost a little embarrassed to have spent time on the Duck Dynasty thing, but I have seen a lot of people trying to claim that it's a First Amendment issue and a free speech issue, and I mean, there are some free speech issues involved, and I'm not a big fan of, especially of secondary boycotts, where people boycott products because they sponsor a program that includes speech they don't like. It seems a little bit attenuated for me, and I don't really support those kind of boycotts, no matter, even when they're on my side. But I don't think it's a First Amendment issue if a network wants to fire someone for saying something that's going to be offensive to their viewers. But, you know, I didn't like it when ABC fired Bill Maher from his politically incorrect show because of things he'd said about the 9/11 attackers or the cruise missiles fired at terrorists compared to the 9/11 attackers. Anyway, I don't want to get into that, but that kind of almost brings me to the whole NSA spying story, and that's what I want to spend most of the time on for the show today. I have, I don't know, maybe close to a dozen clips on NSA spying. The first one I'm going to show, the only clip from Fox News Sunday on NSA spying. I thought their treatment was a little bit biased. You know, the two big news stories this last week on NSA spying were a federal judge, it was a lower court judge, but a federal judge found the whole bulk phone record data collection program to be unconstitutional. You know, that'll be appealed, and it's not the final word, but that was kind of a blow to the program. And then this review panel that President Obama set up came out with these 46 recommendations that said that basically that some of this had gone too far. And so you would think that with that kind of news week, your questions would be, you know, has the NSA spying program gone too far? This one court found it unconstitutional. This panel said it has to be reined in. Has NSA spying gone too far? Are we hurting people's privacy? But how did Fox News Sunday introduce the topic in their for their panel discussion? I'll show you that clip quickly right here.
But I want to talk about the other big story this week, and that is the growing call for restrictions on NSA's surveillance of Americans. We had a federal district judge who said that the bulk collection of phone records, billions of phone records of Americans, is likely unconstitutional. You had the presidential panel come up with 46 recommendations for restrictions. The president indicates he's open to some of them. George, are we in danger of letting our guard down here?
So yeah, that's the question on Fox News Sunday from all these news stories. Are we in danger of letting our guard down? See, that wasn't the first question that came to my mind when I read this judge's decision. And by the way, the judge's decision, and I'm going to get to some newsmaker comments on that in a minute. I put a link to the full, I think it's 68-page federal court decision down in the video description that you can click on. So if you're interested in reading it and all the ways that it attacks the NSA spying program, I recommend reading it. But I also want to get to first this review panel that President Obama set up and came up with all these recommendations. There were a couple members of the panel who were on the Sunday morning shows. The first one I will show is from CNN's State of the Union. This guy's name is Peter Swire. He's a law professor, and he basically, the first thing he said is that this panel that looked at NSA spying, they kind of like the foreign intelligence surveillance, that what is called the 702 program, where we listen in on international calls, and that includes calls from Americans that, as long as they cross an international border. And I think those go too far, but basically they say they like that program, but it's the 215 bulk phone record collection that they think went too far. And I'll show you, here's the clip from Peter Swire on CNN this morning here.
But you did find overreach. That's fair to say, is it not?
Right. So I think it's you can think of it as a mid-course correction. So a lot of the things that get done overseas, we should do it. It's a dangerous world out there. But this phone metadata database, all of Americans' phone calls on record for foreign intelligence purposes, that mismatch between domestic and foreign, I think, is a concern. We don't really want the spy agencies looking at every phone record at home when you're calling your family members. And so we're trying to figure out how to move forward on that piece of the puzzle.
So yeah, I don't really agree that the foreign part, listening in on international phone calls and international internet traffic, there's been definitely some abuses there. I think there was even a story I saw a while back that they listened in on some soldiers' intimate phone conversations with their loved ones, including like maybe even some phone sex conversations. So that seems like a violation of privacy. but the one thing they did think should be reined in somewhat is this bulk phone record collection, the 215 program, and their recommendations. Well, I'll show you another. One of the panelists was over on Face the Nation. This guy's name is Michael Morell. He was deputy CIA director for quite a while, and he was acting CIA director for a while, so he knows something about the programs. And here is how he's describing what the recommendations from the panel were on how to rein in NSA spying, the bulk phone record collection over in this clip.
So what we're recommending is that because this program remains important, okay, perhaps not as important as some have said, but because it remains important, it's important for the government to continue to be able to query this data. What the panel is saying is, in order to better protect privacy and civil liberties, which is an important concern here, we believe two things. We believe that the government should not hold this data any longer. We leave it an open question who should, but we say the government shouldn't hold this data. Somebody else should. The second thing we say is that NSA should have to get a court order for every individual time they want to query this data, not operate under a blanket court order. We think that better protects privacy and civil liberties, while at the same time allowing the government to do what it needs to do to protect the country.
So yeah, that is the way they're going to rein in this bulk phone record collection there. And I mean, I thought that was kind of just the minimum that could possibly be done. I also want to show a clip from Mark Udall, who was over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and he's one of the senators who's been trying to rein this in for quite a while, even before the Edward Snowden revelations came out. So I mean, he's definitely someone to listen to. And he was also talking about how the NSA, how this has shown that the NSA is overreached, and that we should institute all 46 of the panel's recommendations. Anyway, and I'll talk about that a little more after I show the clip here.
The NSA is overreached. We need to quickly move to adopt the 46 recommendations of the President's panel.
All 46?
And Judge Leon I think we need to look at all 46. I'm still studying the report myself, but there are many, many important reforms. It's time to have real reform, not a veneer of reform. You know why? Because we've got to rebuild the American people's trust in our intelligence community so we can be safe, so we can meet the threats that are all over the world. But we don't do that by bulk data collection that violates the privacy of Americans, that's unconstitutional, and is shown to not be effective.
Yeah, so it's unconstitutional and it hasn't been effective. And then on that last point about how the Section 215 program hasn't been effective, one of the things this panel found was that it's never really been used to thwart a terrorist attack. And I've talked about that on some previous Liberal Viewer Sunday Live clip roundups. And I want to go back to that guy, Michael Morell, the guy who was deputy director of the CIA and acting CIA director. And he specifically says that the program hasn't really stopped any terrorist attacks over in this clip.
The key program here that we're talking about is the 215 program, which is the ability of NSA to go in to that database and make sure that terrorists overseas aren't in contact with anybody in the United States.
And you're talking about this collection of telephone numbers, basically, that the NSA has assembled.
So it's telephone numbers, which number called whom, when that occurred, and the duration of the call. That's it. No names attached to it, no content attached to it. And so that's the program. I think one of the misperceptions out there at the moment is that the review group did not see value in this program. And what the review group said is look, the program to date has not played a significant role in stopping terrorist attacks in the United States. But the review group also noted that going forward, it is important.
So I'm not sure why it's important going forward if it hasn't stopped any terrorist attacks. And then, actually, I saw this guy, Michael Morell, said kind of a weird thing. He said there hadn't been any terrorist attacks in the United States since 9/11. And I immediately thought of the Boston Marathon bombing. And then there's some other, like, smaller attacks, the anthrax attacks. And then there's this, like, LA airport attack. And anyway, I'll show you that clip quickly over here.
That there has not been a successful terrorist attack in the United States since 9/11. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and there are a lot of organizations and a lot of people who are responsible for that. And the National Security Agency is one of those agencies. And because of that, those officers who work there are patriots, and we are going to continue to need them to do the work they do because the...
Yeah, so there he is saying there hasn't been an attack in the United States since 9/11, and therefore the people at the NSA are patriots. I don't know. That seems like some sort of mistake, or maybe he meant there haven't been any attacks that have been linked to foreign sources, or I don't know. Even that, it's hard to really say that that's true. But so that guy Mike Morell, and then the other guy showed Peter Swire, I think his name was. They were like the panelists who were talking about the recommendations of this big panel. And some people say that the Obama administration put out the recommendations from the panel this week to sort of cover up the decision of this federal judge finding the whole NSA program unconstitutional or likely unconstitutional. And I want to show you Representative Mike Rogers, who's chairman. He's on a House Intelligence Committee. I can't remember. I think he chairs Homeland Security, House. Well, anyway, he's a leading advocate of NSA spying in the House, a Republican. He's a former FBI agent. And I don't think he's like seen any NSA spying he doesn't like, or very rarely. And I want to show how he reacted. George Stephanopoulos over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos on ABC read a little bit of Judge Leon's opinion, which again you can read for yourself by clicking on a link down in the video description. And here's how pro-NSA spying Republican Representative Mike Rogers responded to this federal judge's decision over here.
Right here. He said, I cannot imagine a more indiscriminate and arbitrary invasion than the systematic and high-tech collection and retention of personal data on virtually every single citizen for purposes of querying it and analyzing it without judicial approval. Surely such a program infringes on that degree of privacy that the founders enshrined in the Fourth Amendment. Your response?
Well, a couple of things. 16 federal judges, 36 different opinions, all have had a different opinion that it is not. Remember, no names, no addresses, just numbers. And these are business records, not your personal records. That's very, very different. There's been hundreds of appellate decisions reaffirming the government's right to get business records in the course of terror investigations, or in this case, determining if a terrorist from overseas is calling into the United States. So this is one case when you have a huge volume. Anyway, it's, again, perspective is important. Yes, this one district judge that doesn't handle national security cases had a difference of opinion. That's our good system. But it is he set aside his own decision, as he said, likely to be overturned because of the sheer volume and body of federal judges who have already reviewed this. As late as last July, by the way, or as early as last July, reaffirmed the fact that this program is legal. It does meet the constitutional test, does meet Fourth Amendment tests, and should continue in the face of the threats to the United States. I think that's important.
So I do not agree with Mike Rogers there at all, except possibly that this case may be overturned, and that's because it's kind of up in the air as a legal question as to whether business records, you have an expectation of privacy in business records or not. As I've talked about in previous Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup shows, there's this Supreme Court case from the 1970s, Smith versus Maryland, that said that because the records were in the custody of the phone company and not in everybody's personal custody, that you don't expect them to be private because the phone company can already see them. But that was for collecting this kind of what's now called metadata, like the phone call duration and the two ends of the call, that information, for just one person. And to take that case and apply it to a bulk phone record data collection program that collects every single phone call in the United States, I mean, that is quite a stretch. And I want to show Senator Mark Udall responded basically to what Representative Mike Rogers said about this federal court's decision saying NSA spying was unconstitutional, and I want to show you that over here.
Well, you heard Chairman Rogers about the constitutionality as well. He says that, 16 other judges have said that the program is constitutional, have consistently approved it.
Well, it'll wind its way through the courts, but it's hard for me to believe, and it's hard for lots of Americans to believe with whom I talk, that these general warrants, if you will, and orders to collect every day tens of millions of Americans' phone records is somehow constitutional. It doesn't fit the standard in the Fourth Amendment of unreasonable search and seizure. You have to have probable cause. By the way, these are innocent Americans, and I would counter Chairman Rogers' point. This is an invasion of privacy. If you take the business records of every American, of all of our phone calls, you can get a pretty good idea of what people are doing based on when they call, who they call, from where they call.
And that's definitely true, that you can find a lot of private information about people if you just have this phone call information. You can make a lot of conclusions, especially if you have sophisticated computer algorithms that analyze it and take, every phone call you ever made, and they can find out or hypothesize very accurately a lot of things about you that are kind of private. So that's definitely, hopefully, what federal courts will consider, like this federal judge Richard Leon did. And now I like what Mark Udall said there, and he's a good Democrat on these NSA spying issues, but I noticed every single person who they asked about whether Edward Snowden should get amnesty, including Mark Udall, they all said no. Some of them were harsher than others. Like, I'll show you Peter King, saying he's a traitor later. But here's Mark Udall asked if Edward Snowden should get amnesty, and saying no, he should face charges over in this clip.
I think that Edward Snowden ought to come back to the United States. He ought to stand on his own 2 feet. He ought to make his case. History will judge him in however way historians and the American people decide to make that call. But I'm focused on reforming in a fundamental set of ways the way in which the NSA operates. That's where our attention ought to be focused right now.
So when you're saying he should come home, you think he should face charges?
I do. He broke his oath. He broke the law. Come home, make the case that somehow there was a higher purpose here. But Edward Snowden ought to come back to the United States.
Now I think Edward Snowden has done a really good service by his revelations and what he's been charged with. He's been charged on the Espionage Act. I think he's been overcharged. Maybe, and the one thing I like about what Senator Udall said there is that he should make the case that he was doing some higher purpose. In some ways, I would like to see a jury trial. As a former criminal defense attorney, I'd almost like to, I'd like to take that case. I'd like to try to convince 12 jurors, or at least one of the 12 jurors, so that, all you need is one juror to hang up a jury, that what he did was justified. Use the justification defense. Maybe get some good whistleblower jury instructions. I don't know. I've never handled a whistleblower case, so I can't say that I'm an expert on that. But I really was surprised that even Mark Udall, even the people most critical of NSA spying, seem to think that he should be prosecuted. And I'll show you. Here's that guy, Michael Morell, the former CIA deputy director. He basically said the same thing, that Edward Snowden should be prosecuted over on Face the Nation in this clip.
The president should give him some sort of amnesty?
No, I do not. And I feel strongly about that. He violated the trust put in him by the United States government. He has committed a crime, in my view. A whistleblower doesn't run. A whistleblower does not disclose information that has nothing to do with what he says his cause is, which is the privacy and civil liberties of Americans. If I could talk to Mr. Snowden myself, what I would say is, Edward, you say you're a patriot. You say you want to protect the privacy and civil liberties of Americans. You say that you wanted Americans to have a debate about this and to make up their mind about what to do about this. Well, if you really believe that, if you really believe that Americans should be the judge of this program, then you should also believe that the Americans should be the judge of your behavior in this regard. So if you are the patriot that you say you are, you should come home and be judged.
So yeah, I guess from a former deputy CIA director, that's not all that surprising. Now, one of the most harshest comments on Edward Snowden came almost unsolicited from Representative Peter King. He's a Republican from New York, and kind of like Mike Rogers, he's never really met any kind of NSA spying he doesn't like. He's also like borderline Islamophobic, and some of the comments he's made, and he like had these hearings on whether there's like a Islamic threat in the United States, well, whatever. And I'll show you, here's what he said about whether Edward Snowden should get amnesty over on Meet the Press in this clip.
First of all, I think Edward Snowden is a defector and a traitor, and the fact is there is no agency that is more monitored and more watched than the NSA. It's monitored by the courts, by the Justice Department. It's monitored by the intelligence committees in the Senate and the House. I think it's absolutely indispensable to our national security. The president said it's essential. The president said there have been no abuses.
And first of all, that may be true what you're saying in terms of oversight, but the American people had no idea what it was doing. Now, you could think that's a good thing, but there was no real debate about this.
Well, I don't think everyone has to know what a spy agency is doing. By the nature of a spy agency, it's kept secret. That's the purpose of it.
But is it collapsing? Is Snowden right about the fact that this is collapsing? Is it going to exist in the future the way it exists now?
If it doesn't, it's going to be calamitous for the country. We need the NSA to remain. As I said, there were no abuses by the NSA. The president has said that. This is all, to me, a debate generated by the hysteria caused by Edward Snowden, and why we're listening to him is beyond me.
So yeah, like I said, those are the harshest anti-Edward Snowden comments, and no abuses. You know, the other thing I didn't put maybe later I'll put a link down in the video description after this is a recorded show about there were some abuses where I saw that some of this bulk phone record data collection information was secretly passed to the DEA and the IRS to be used against American citizens domestically. So when they say there are no abuses, there have been abuses, and I definitely saw that story. I researched it earlier today, so I'll put a link down below when this is a recorded show later. So he's wrong about there are no abuses, and I don't know why he's so harsh on Edward Snowden. And one more comment I want to show on the Edward Snowden issue. From Senator Patrick Leahy, who's been pretty good on this, not as good as Mark Udall, but he's definitely been trying to rein in NSA spying, and I think he said that Edward Snowden was kind of irrelevant. Of course, then later he used Edward Snowden as a way to attack the NSA's the controls on the NSA, you know, the fact that he got away with all this data and they don't even know what he got away with. So first he says he's irrelevant, then he's relevant to the NSA, but in between he says some things I agree with a little more about. Well, anyway, I'll talk about it a little more after I show you the clip here.
Over 200 years, I think the Founding Fathers would be astounded to see what NSA and others are doing. You know, it's not Snowden. In a way, he's irrelevant on this. It's a question of how well this has been looked at and how much the American public knows about it. I was heartened by the New York Times editorial today, which strongly endorses the legislation Congressman Sensenbrenner, Republican, and I have introduced to reform what the NSA is doing, and the president's panel on this, a very good panel,
but the panel
recommends the same thing.
But the panel wants to allow the bulk collection of our metadata, that digital thumbprints with some controls. So that's what you support. So basically, the government shouldn't be able to stockpile it, in your view. A third party should have at it.
Well, we're going to the first public exposure to what the panel has said is going to be before the Senate Judiciary Committee in a couple weeks, and we're going to go into that great length. But there have been problems, and one of the reasons so many of the big companies, Yahoo, Google, and so on, are concerned about this is it gets them in crosshairs. And the other thing that bothers me greatly, we talk about what a great job they're doing. They did such a poor job at NSA that a subcontractor was able to steal all their secrets. And today, after spending millions of dollars, they still don't know what was stolen.
So yeah, he says there that at the beginning that Edward Snowden is irrelevant, then at the end that Edward Snowden is, excuse me, that Edward Snowden is proof that the NSA is out of control, and then in the middle he talked about his legislation to rein in the NSA along with Sensenbrenner that would put the definitions from the Patriot Act. It would narrow the definitions and would require individualized warrants, and that's also one of the things from the panel. So like I said, there's some good stuff in there, though he was kind of back and forth on Edward Snowden himself. Before I leave the topic of NSA spying, I want to show you one last clip. This is back to Representative Mike Rogers with George Stephanopoulos talking about how there's an increasing threat, and they tie it to Christmas. I like to call this the have a very scary Christmas clip that you can see here.
I think we need to take into consideration.
Finally, you've warned that the terror threat may be increasing again, Al-Qaeda on the rise again, and we know that they have targeted the Christmas season before. Do you have any more reason to be especially concerned right now? Is the threat level going up around this holiday season?
Well, I think and any national holiday that we would experience here, like Christmas, is something that we are concerned about. I don't think I see any other threat stream that I wouldn't say is out of the norm. But again, and the reason we say that is because there are more affiliates, more al-Qaeda affiliates from around the world, al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. You have al-Shabaab now claiming some al-Qaeda affiliate, Sharia in Libya. All of these groups want to have and have the aspiration to commit acts of violence against Westerners in the United States. That's why this threat has grown, and we have more chances to miss something, and we have just less opportunity not to pay attention to every single clue we can find to make sure that we protect the citizens of the United States. And
yeah, now that last part, that's the part I dislike the most about this whole NSA spying argument from people like Mike Rogers, where they say we have to have this information or this great threat is going to hit us. I read the 9/11 report, and I even made a video about how NSA spying wouldn't have stopped 9/11. And from my understanding of the situation, we had all the information we needed. We just couldn't put it together. We had too much information in some ways. And I think NSA spying may also, some of the NSA spying that we do gives us too much information where we have information overload and we miss the important information because there's just too much. So I think it may be the opposite of what Mike Rogers was saying there. Of course, that's not really that surprising that they would be hyping up the threat from Al-Qaeda. Not that there's no threat from Al-Qaeda, but the more NSA spying and these programs become unpopular, the more you're going to hear things like they're necessary, even though I showed the clip earlier that this panel found that they'd never really stopped any sort of terrorist incident. Or they'll say that they would have stopped 9/11, and there's no evidence that they would have stopped 9/11. And I didn't show a clip, but there was someone saying it would have stopped 9/11. Can't remember. I think it was even a Democrat, but I can't recall. So expect, as this whole NSA spying debate goes forward, and you saw Patrick Leahy say that they're going to have this panel talk to the Senate Judiciary Committee and give its 46 recommendations, and they'll hold hearings, so that'll probably generate a lot of news. And so as that happens, expect to see people like Mike Rogers and Pete King talk more and more about how there's this big threat that supposedly all this spying is protecting us from, but I haven't seen a lot of evidence. Maybe they'll come up with it, but it seems more like hype than evidence to me. So anyway, those were all the clips on NSA spying. I have a few other topics I want to cover before I get to the live discussion. I see how many people are watching. It looks like, I've got over 100 people watching right now, 104 from what I see. So I want to try to get to a little bit of the live discussion at the end. But, last week I covered this budget deal, and which ended up passing. They didn't end up passing any help for the 1.3 million people whose long-term unemployment benefits are going to run out a few days after Christmas. So that was kind of sad. But they did pass this budget deal. And one of the things I thought was interesting is no one on any of the Sunday shows last Sunday was against the budget deal. There were some people who, they were quoted from earlier in the week. There was like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, but no one actually came on to the Sunday shows to say something against this budget deal. So I was interested to see Senator Tom Coburn from Oklahoma, who's kind of a Tea Party, more right-wing guy. He actually explained why he was against this budget deal and why he thinks agreement is not a good thing. And I want to show you that clip from, I believe he was on Meet the Press, unless I've remembered that wrong. But anyway, you'll see once I play it right here.
Yeah, we can come together and agree. What, David, I would say to you is the reason we're in trouble on deficits and debts is not because we didn't agree, but because we did. We agreed to spend $740 billion we didn't have last year. We agreed to waste $30 billion, as I put out in the waste book this year. We agreed to continue to let Medicare have $80 billion a year in fraud in it. We're going to have $80 billion a year in fraud in Obamacare. We agreed to all those things. So the story coming out of Washington is we don't get along. I would dispute that. We get along just fine with the status quo of the government being ineffective and inefficient. So we pass a bill that raises spending and raises taxes and denies what we promised the American people, and everybody says, oh my goodness, how great. You grew the government some more and you charged us more taxes and you didn't fix any of the problems.
So Senator Schumer addressed.
So yeah, there's finally someone coming live to one of the Sunday shows to oppose the budget deal. I don't know whether you call what it raised was taxes or not. There are these user fees. The security fee on airline tickets went from like $5 to $11, and then there is this increased contribution for federal workers who new hires next year will start having to pay. I think it's like 1.2% more towards their own retirement, but neither of those are really like taxes. I guess you could call the airline fee as a tax. I think that's sort of, I think it's a tax on airline passengers. So yeah, I guess that could be called a tax, but they call it a user fee. But the other thing I also forgot to show, or I guess I didn't forget to show people who were against the budget deal because no one who was against the budget deal actually appeared. But something I forgot to show about the budget deal last week was the budget deal did put off the possibility of a government shutdown for a couple years, but it didn't get rid of the possibility of a crisis over the raising of the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling has to be raised like in February or March of 2014. So there may possibly be a fight on that. And even though I showed several clips from Representative Paul Ryan last week, I didn't show the one where he said they might, the Republicans are going to want to get something. So I want to show, so that I have seen several Republicans say that the Republicans are going to try to get something in this negotiation to raise the debt ceiling in February or March of next year. But I do want to show a clip of New York Senator Chuck Schumer, who was also over on NBC's Meet the Press, and he was saying he didn't think that there actually was going to be any negotiation, or the Republicans were going to give up on that. And I'll show you that clip here.
I would predict that Republicans will back off any hostage-taking, adding extraneous, irrelevant issues to the debt ceiling. They learned in October that if they followed the Tea Party and said, we're going to let the government default unless we get our way, it was highly unpopular. I understand there's some saber-rattling right now by Speaker Boehner and Minority Leader McConnell, and that's natural. They cut a good deal, I thought, on the budget, and they had to show the hard right that they're going to do something else. But at the end of the day, the president's going to hold firm. No negotiations on debt ceiling. The Republicans will look back to October and said, we're not going through this again.
So here's a question.
Okay, so that's Senator Chuck Schumer from New York, who's a fairly experienced politician in Washington, saying the Republicans are not going to go down that road again. There won't be a fight over the debt ceiling. And hopefully that would be good for even the world economy. For my non-U.S. viewers, I know about 40% of my viewers are outside the United States. I want to show I think she's managing director or some title like that of the International Monetary Fund, part of the World Bank. This woman, Christine Lagarde, who was over on also on Meet the Press, and was talking about how it's possible that the growth in the U.S. economy and this budget deal might renew American leadership in the world, the growth of the world economy, as long as this debt deal doesn't blow the whole thing, basically. Anyway, I'll show you the clip here.
Deadline approaching in February and March about raising the debt ceiling. Has the U.S. reemerged as a global economic leader, or is it still acting irresponsibly?
It is the economic leader, let's face it, given the size of the economy and the, below potential but still reasonable growth that is picking up now. The budget deal that was cut at year-end is a very good sign of responsibility, accountability, and realism. I, for myself, certainly hope that in February Congress will be equally responsible and will not threaten the recovery with yet another debate about whether or not the US will honor or default in February. And
So yeah, I thought that was an interesting comment, sort of a more international perspective on how these stupid political games in the United States can affect the growth of the world economy. So I hope there isn't a big fight over the debt ceiling in February, March. And the other fallout from this deal, I mentioned how they haven't extended the unemployment benefits for 1.3 million unemployed people, and poor people and even working people aren't really getting a good deal out of any of these budget deals. And I was interested to see that over on CNN State of the Union, Candy Crowley brought up the issue of the minimum wage as something, that's something President Obama said he wants to try to readdress. And for some reason, Republicans seem to be against the minimum wage. And I'm going to show you a possible Republican dissenter on that in just a minute. But first, I want to show you Candy Crowley talking to Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. He's actually one of the most conservative Democratic senators. And talking about the possibility that there might be some raise in the minimum wage in 2014 over in this clip.
It makes it even harder. Minimum wage? You think that might pass next year, an increase?
I would think that if they look at basically the disparity that we have in this country and how far we're getting apart, that something has to be changed. And I think the strongest argument, I think the wage was $1.60 in 1968, Candy, the minimum wage. If it had been adjusted by inflation, no politics at all, we'd be at over $10, well over $10. But with that being said, I think that there's so many people now because we've lost so many of the good jobs. Doesn't that tell you need to change your tax laws, especially your corporate laws that allows corporations to domicile offshore, not pay taxes, take jobs offshore, but use this consumer market to sell in? Things need to change.
So yeah, I was glad to see even the most conservative Democratic senator there, or one of the most conservative, actually talking about income inequality and the need to raise the minimum wage, because I think several or a couple months ago I showed in a Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundup, I did a few clips on how almost all of the income growth for decades has gone to the very top few percent in the United States, and the middle class has had almost no income growth for decades. And I even saw someone, I can't remember, I think I can't remember exactly which pundit. You know, I try to show newsmaker clips rather than just the pundit clips because I don't want to be like a commenter on a commenter, although I will occasionally show some clips from the pundits. But there was one pundit who said something about how whether it's a Democrat or Republican, the person who can put together a populist message that speaks to the middle class about the unfairness about all the money going to the people on Wall Street and the elites, that's going to be the message that really resonates for 2016. And I think possibly former Republican presidential candidate Mike Huckabee, who's this Fox News contributor, but who might run in 2016, he may be one of the ones putting together a message that this populist anti-Wall Street message that could make him a good candidate, both in the Republican primary and maybe even a good general election candidate, especially if the economy and the economy for the middle class doesn't grow between now and 2016. And I want to show a clip of Mike Huckabee where Chris Wallace asked him about some comments he'd made about it's actually an axis of evil between Washington, D.C. and Wall Street. And I thought that was kind of interesting coming from a Republican, although by the end you'll see there are definitely Republican parts to his ideas, and you can see that clip here.
And you are also, like the president, interested in income inequality. I want to put up something that you said recently at an event. We devalue people sometimes who are poor. We do not deem them worthy of the same level of treatment we give those who are connected to the real axis of evil in this country, the axis of power that exists between Washington and Wall Street. I must say I was struck by that axis of evil between Washington and Wall Street.
Well, there's such a collusion, Chris, between what happens in the financial world and what happens in the political world. One hand washes another and one feeds another. And who takes it in the teeth? It's most of the working class people of America. Big banks get bailed out. Big insurance companies get bailed out. Who bails them out? Washington bails them out. Why? Because there are campaign contributions that come along with the bailout. I hear politicians that will resent the fact that some single mom is getting some assistance to put food on the table for her 3 children. She's doing the best she can, busting her backside trying to help them. And those same people that somehow resent that single mom are going ahead and saying, but it's perfectly okay to bail out to the tune of billions big banks who are run by Ivy League people who should have known better how to recklessly mismanage. Now, the point that I do make, and a lot of people misunderstand, I don't want the government coming in and creating a situation where they determine what income equality looks like. I think the government can mess more up than they can ever fix. So the last thing I want is more and bigger government getting involved. But I do want there to be a calling out and an attention given to the fact that a lot of the crisis in America is not a money crisis. It is the moral crisis.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Although at the end there, of course, he's saying he doesn't want government solutions. So actually he just wants to talk about the problem, but not really do anything about the problem, at least, you know, since he's running as to head the executive branch. So, but anyway, I thought I would show that to you. Now, I also want to show one more clip from Mike Huckabee that I think also shows that he may be running for president. This is sort of on the question of Obamacare, which they talked about on Fox News Sunday. I didn't show several clips about that, but one thing I thought was interesting, I don't often hear Republicans who are able to really articulate Republican alternatives to Obamacare, especially on the pre-existing condition issue, because basically you need the individual mandate to make up for getting rid of pre-existing conditions, because if you don't have an individual mandate that requires everyone to get insurance, but you don't allow insurance companies to exclude people who have pre-existing conditions, then people can just wait until they get sick and then buy insurance. So Republicans don't really have a good answer to that, except Mike Huckabee actually talked a little bit about these high-risk pools for people who can't get insurance because they have pre-existing conditions. And Part of what he said actually sounded pretty good, even though I don't really agree with the policy. At least he was able to articulate a Republican alternative to the individual mandate as a way to get rid of pre-existing condition exclusions on insurance. And I will show you that clip. Let's see, that is number, yeah, I'll show you that clip here.
But what we should have done was to recognize that of those 15%, about half of them were insurable. They just didn't want insurance. They'd rather spend their money on buying a new truck or maybe investing it in an added room on the house. But there are people who are uninsurable. And for those people, there should be a safety net. But the problem is with Obamacare, you're putting them into the main marketplace, which skews the cost for the rest of the market. What we should have done is something that was comparable to what was done back in 1982. Ronald Reagan signed a bill. It was called TEFRA, the Tax Equity Family Relief Act. TEFRA operates in about 19 states. Arkansas was one of them. What we did in our TEFRA program was take people who had severe developmental disabilities, for example, and sometimes those medical expenses can be into the hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. Well, there's no way a family can afford that, but the only way for them to qualify for Medicaid would be to impoverish the family. Well, that doesn't make sense. So what we should do is to say there's three things that'll still be comparable: a premium, a deductible, and a copay. But it's going to be a reasonable premium, a reasonable deductible, and a reasonable copay. And then the government would, in fact, subsidize those people whose medical expenses are extraordinary. I don't think most Republicans, most conservatives would or should have a problem with that. And if they do, they need to get over it.
So, yeah, that actually, even though I don't agree with that way of helping people with pre-existing conditions, I think Mike Huckabee did a pretty good job of articulating an alternative way of dealing with the problem. Of course, what he's talking about are government-subsidized health insurance exchanges. They're just not as big as the ones under Obamacare. And there are a lot of other problems with that Republican alternative. But at least he seems like he's talking a good game, and he's putting together some good talking points for a run for president in 2016. Who knows? I mean, they talked about that some more on Fox News Sunday. And, of course, all the shows that I take clips from, there are links. At least if they're available at all on the internet, I give you links to the full program or to the clips that I've used. You can see that down in the video description. There are only a couple more clips I want to show you. For one more on Obamacare, you know, the sad thing is that I did in a LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup a few weeks back. I talked about President Obama's statement, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it, and whether that was a lie, and how it seemed no one in the media was really pointing out that what he was saying was pretty much the way to put in sort of lay terms what is actually in the law, the grandfather clause that says that any health insurance plans that existed before the law was passed wouldn't be affected by the requirements of the law. Now, that doesn't mean that insurance companies can't cancel plans. It just means that the law doesn't require them to cancel any plans that existed before the law was signed in March of 2010, which is why I thought it was particularly egregious that Bill Kristol over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos said that what Barack Obama said while signing the law in March of 2010 was a lie, because he actually said, if you like your current plan, you can keep it, which is exactly what it said in the law. And anyway, and there was no one on This Week with George Stephanopoulos to defend the president because, you know, PolitiFact has called it the lie of the year. And anyway, I whatever the facts are, I guess politically at least this is a lost battle for the president, whatever I happen to believe about whether he lied or didn't lie. But anyway, I'll show you that clip with has Bill Kristol and George Stephanopoulos, and then this guy Steve Rattner none of them willing to defend Obama over in this clip.
I think for the country, the worst year of his presidency was 2010, and the worst day was March 23rd, 2010, when he signed the health care legislation and said, on the very day he signed it, I'd just like to remind people of this one more time, I said this once or twice, but it bears repeating. If you like your current insurance, you will keep your current insurance. Nobody is changing what you've got if you're happy with it. If you like your doctor, you'll be able to keep your doctor. He said that on the day he signed the law. It was false. And, you know, the worst thing in politics, you can get away with misleading people if the result is pretty good. You can get away with a bad result sometimes if people think you've been sincere and honest and trying to pursue a policy that you honestly felt was right. The combination of misleading and a bad result, and the results are going to keep getting worse, incidentally, for the next few months. I think that's devastating.
PolitiFact called that the lie of the year. How do you explain how it was allowed to stand for so long?
Honestly, George, I can't. I've thought about it over and over again. I've asked friends of mine in the White House how this could happen, because there were people who knew this. In fact, there were people in the press, and some actually pointed it out, and yet over and over again, the president was allowed to go out there and say that. And
So, yeah, that's pretty sad. I don't know. Maybe I'm the last person in the world who thinks that it wasn't a lie, that, I mean, it didn't end up being completely accurate, especially for people who bought healthcare plans after the law was passed, because the law only protects plans from being canceled by the law if they were bought before the law was passed. But what Bill Kristol quoted there was what President Obama said the day the law was passed. If you like your current plan, you can keep it. You know, the law doesn't do anything to make your insurance company cancel it. Of course, it doesn't protect you from your insurance company canceling it either. But anyway, we'll see how that all works out. There are two other quick clips I want to show you before I get to the discussion section to see what's in there. One is since it's almost Christmas time and there weren't a lot of newsmakers, they did some weird sort of non-news related stuff on these programs. One of which, or actually on two different programs, they had authors on. Over on Face the Nation, they had just fiction authors. One of whom was Terry McMillan, who has written some books. I haven't read one. Is Waiting to Exhale. I haven't even seen that movie, but she said something that I thought was kind of weird. They were talking about whether books are even going to last because of, you know, e-books and electronic books. And she actually said when she goes to book signings, everyone on the panel loved books and they like, you know, being able to read an actual physical book. And she said at book signings, people actually try to get her to sign their Kindles. I thought that was kind of weird. Anyway, I thought it was kind of funny. I'll show you right here.
I love leaning back and falling asleep with a book. And plus, on book tour, when people have handed me their Nooks and their Kindles, I just say, you know, I can't sign that. And I'm not going to. Oh, please, Miss McMillan. I'm like, no.
You do a selfie, though.
Pardon?
You do a selfie.
No, I'm not signing a Kindle.
I can't. Do people actually ask authors to sign their Kindles? That just seemed almost a comedy clip to me. And, you know, one thing I saw that was covered on Saturday Night Live, speaking of comedy shows, that was not covered on any of the Sunday morning shows, that China landed a rover on on the moon, a unmanned rover on the moon. It's like the first time that's happened in quite a while, and so I was kind of surprised that wasn't covered anywhere except on Saturday Night Live. In the final clip I want to show you for this Liberal Viewer Sunday Live clip roundup here.
China's first moon rover, the Jade Rabbit, this week began its mission exploring the lunar surface. The rover is reportedly searching for a good location to leave some menus.
Hey, was that racist? I think that might have been racist, but I don't know. I guess comedians can get away with that kind of thing more than people on Duck Dynasty. I guess that's the lesson of today's Liberal Viewer Sunday Live clip roundup. You know, I'm looking over at my stats here. I'm already at over an hour, so I need to finish up very quickly. I'm going to look if there are any good on-topic comments I can take. I'm going to look through here. It looks like a lot of people were talking about Duck Dynasty. Duck Dynasty. Let me see if I can... let's see. I'm going to look through here real quick, see if I can get something going. Duck Dynasty. I thought that would be like people would be upset that I even talked about Duck Dynasty, but it seems like it's gotten a... They're all arguing with each other about it, and I can't even seem to break in. Well, I'm glad I got so much discussion going. Yeah, it says, NO8549 says, LV's going to have to wade through a lot of these religion freedom of speech debates here today. Yeah, that's exactly my problem here, and like I said, I'm already over an hour, so... Simiols says Cruz Palin 2016. I think that may be a joke. But yeah, I'm having problems wading through your discussions with each other, so I think I'm just going to let you argue with each other and finish up the Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundup for this week. Thank you all for joining me. It looks like at some points I had more than 100 viewers. Right now it looks like, yeah, we're a little bit over 100. So also I wanted to let you know one of the things I'm thinking of doing starting in the new year for Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundup is I'm going to have you viewers vote on what is the best clip from the week and then try to make an edited, produced video based on that clip. I haven't worked out all the details, but since I've got 100 people watching now, the people who are my core, most committed viewers, I wanted to let you know that I'm working that out. I'll tell you more about that in the next couple weeks to come. So anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed all the clips I picked out for you. I'm sorry I couldn't wade through the comment section a little better to thank you all for the live discussion you got going there, because I really appreciate the people who joined me live. But of course I enjoy the people who the thousands who watch it during the week, as well as the 100 or so who joined me live to talk about the Sunday shows. So I'll be doing this every week for the foreseeable future, Sunday 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. Please join me. Look for my edited, produced videos coming up during the week. Hopefully I'll have one in the next week or two. So have a good end of your weekend here in the United States or around the world, beginning of your week and your holiday, and see you around the internet.